everyone. It's episode 83 of the CRICKETher Weekly. Now, the Women's Big Bash League has kicked off this week. Sid, what's the current situation?
The current situation is COVID central down in Hobart. The competition had barely been going like 36 hours before they got their ass kicked by COVID. Because of the situation in Tasmania, where they were concerned about a breakout of the Delta variant. So they locked down Tasmania, and there was concerns that the matches themselves wouldn't even be able to go ahead. Cricket Australia did a quick pivot, a quick shimmy, and they seem to have gone in a moment from a narrative of the teams aren't in a secure bubble environment. Don't worry, girls, you're not in a bubble. You're able to do stuff. It's not going to be like being in a bubble like last year. To actually, guys, they've been in a bubble the whole time, and we're in a secure medical bubble, so we can definitely let the WBBL go ahead. Oh
no, you're doing your Australian accent again. Here we go. Apologies to all Australian viewers.
Yeah, apologies. But they have been able to go ahead with the matches. They negotiated with the Tasmanian government, and they were able to continue playing the matches this weekend behind closed doors. I think it does draw some questions about whether it's realistic for them to go hopping around Australia for the rest of the competition. But we'll find out what happens, I guess. What will be, will be. More importantly, on the field, the Sydney Sixers are top of the table. That might not come as a surprise to anybody, but actually, in fact, they're the only team, along with the Hobart Hurricanes, who played 2 games. Everyone else has just played 1 game. So they've played 2-1-2, and that leaves them on top. But we've had a couple of exciting games. The Sixers game against the Hurricanes this morning, Shafali Verma got a 50 off 40-something balls, and did her thing of just smack, and that's the job she's being paid to do. So fantastic for her. And then the Brisbane Heat versus the Scorchers, Raf, was a bit of a scorcher.
It was, wasn't it? Yeah, we got a super over in the end. It was one that Heat really should have won. They needed 24 off the last 30 balls with 6 wickets in hand. And you have to say that they choked a bit. They lost a tumble of wickets, and then they didn't have a brilliant time in the super over. I mean, they did make 11 in the super over. I think that the Scorchers had to chase 12. And Sophie Devine came out and hit 2 sixes. She hit a 6 to win the match. So, I mean, it was just a 6. They had to go upstairs and check because it just touched the rope. But fantastic. And, I haven't really made any secret that I am a little bit of a Scorcher supporter, and that the reason for that is Sophie Devine. I just think she's brilliant. She's a lovely person, and she's a fantastic cricketer. And this was another example of that, really. And it's so nice having seen her really down in the dumps and really struggling against England in New Zealand earlier this year, and then she went off and took that kind of break for her own mental health. It's so nice to now see her back out there doing what she does best, and when she was in England and she hit that 50 at Hove, and she was talking afterwards about kind of having recovered, and she just says, when I'm in my best place as a cricketer mentally, I'm not thinking about anything, I'm just hitting the ball, and you can see that in the way that she plays, and it looked like that's how she played today. So that was so nice. It was so nice to see that.
It was, yeah. And I published a piece earlier this week about death overs in WBBL, and that really does show the extent to which the Heat choked, because if you need 24 off 24 balls, in almost all cases, the batting team go on to win that. So, if you're not winning nearly 24 off 24 balls, then you have kind of blown it.
It was 24 off 30.
Yeah, but 24 off 24, yeah. Okay, so 24 off 30, you really ought to make it. Yeah, so yeah.
Anyway, I'm happy because, the Scorchers supported me.
You're happy because Sophie Devine's happy?
Yeah, basically. Anyway, so we've been... there do seem to have been more extras bowled this year than usual, Sid. That's a sort of impressionistic assessment, is that right?
Yeah, someone posted about this on social media, so I thought I'd go back through the ball by ball data that we've got. So there's a bit of a treasure trove of ball by ball data actually available on a website called cricksheets.org. And you have to kind of be able to kind of process this data. It's quite raw data. So you need a computer programmer on hand. Luckily, we have a computer programmer on hand. And we were able to go through that data. There's about 250 WBBL games there, so not quite all of them, but most of them, enough to get a really good impression. And the number of extras has definitely gone up over time. I posted a chart on Twitter that you can go and have a look at, but you can see that the number of extras per over has gone up from about 0.35 to about 0.45 and more over the last couple of seasons. So there are more extras being bowled. Why do you think this is, Raf?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, isn't it? For me, there's a bit too much emphasis nowadays that's coming, I think, from the coaches on women bowling quickly, and that comes often at the expense of accuracy. There's this really big obsession around, who's going to bowl the fastest? And it does seem to be particularly potent in Australia. I mean, we've had it over here to some extent because there's this whole thing around Izzy Wong, for example. She's going to be the first woman to bowl faster than 80 miles per hour, and she's really keen to do that. And that's great, and it's good to have ambitions. But particularly in Australia, there's this big thing of, we're wheeling out the next big thing. And the next big thing always seems to be somebody who's going to bowl really quickly. We don't, the coaches don't wheel somebody out and go, well, this person, she's never going to bowl faster than 70 miles per hour, but she's going to take loads of wickets, which I actually think is more important. You can bowl as quickly as you like, but if you're bowling like 3 or 4 wides every over, then you've wiped out any advantage that you gain from that pace.
Well, yeah, and the world's best bowlers are not actually necessarily the world's cricket's bowlers. Your Megan Shute and your Marizanne Kapp, they're not the ones that are the most famed for being the absolute fastest. They can bowl quick deliveries, but really, both of them, who are like probably the first 2 bowlers you'd pick on your dream 11, are known for being able to put it in the right place, and that's how they keep down the runs.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that there is a little bit too much of a focus, and I think that that's coming from the coaches, a little bit too much of a focus on speed. And it's interesting that when you did do the analysis, it is bearing out this suggestion that there's a few more extras. Now, we've been talking about kind of following and watching WBBL, but by that we unfortunately mean that we haven't actually been able to watch the games, or we haven't actually watched the games, and we've been engaging with highlights and with video clips and obviously the scorecards. Why haven't we actually been sat down watching the games, Sid?
Well, as we mentioned last week, that the games this week have been available on the Sky channel, and it has been possible to subscribe to that if we wanted to. We could have paid, I think, £35 for a month's subscription to that. But there seems to be some questions over how much these games Sky are actually going to show, and essentially people are asking Sky online and they're refusing to answer, which suggests to us that they're not planning to show even all of the games to which they've definitely brought rights for. And it's not actually clear to us in the UK which games they have brought the rights for. We're unclear whether they've bought the rights for the entire tournament or for just the games that are being shown on pay TV in Australia. There's some suggestion that we might be able to watch on the Cricket Australia website the games that are not being shown on pay TV in Australia, which is actually most of the games from now on. So the pay TV have got the first few, but the pay TV have also got the last few, and Sky at the moment are refusing to go, we're going to broadcast the semi-finals and the final. And I'm sorry guys, but I'm not going to pay out money if you're going to go, well actually we're not going to broadcast that because we've got something best to show, like live WWF from 5 years ago.
Well, I think it does
Grumpy said.
It does seem to be that they, as soon as the men's T20 World Cup starts, they're reverting away from showing any WBBL and they're going, no, men's cricket is more important. And for us, we just feel like, why should we reward that attitude to cricket with our money?
Yep.
So I think that's what it comes down to. So it's a shame, but as you say, maybe we'll be able to watch some of them, and maybe if we put some pressure on Sky, they might change their minds.
You never know.
It's you did also tweet that you thought it was a shame that it was disappointing that Cricket Australia had actually sold the rights to Sky without saying to them, please can you actually make sure that you show some of the games, particularly the semi-finals and the final. And we had a bit of comeback on that, didn't we? People saying, oh well, it's not Cricket Australia's responsibility to check that Raf and Sid in England can watch the WBBL. I mean, we're not the only people in England who'd be watching, obviously. Well, kind of understand that, and obviously Cricket Australia to some extent are interested in taking the money from the highest bidder, because they can then they will then say, oh well, that money then goes back into goes back into cricket.
Particularly in these challenging times. Yeah, you can understand that, but it doesn't mean that we're not disappointed. And, I just feel that if they'd said to Sky, look, we're going to put a clause in here saying you have to show these matches, would Sky have then gone, oh, well, in that case, we're not paying you as much money? I think Sky would still have bought them.
Yeah, exactly. And also you do have to think about the longer term thing. I mean, it's the thing that we've had in the UK, isn't it? Where the ECB back in 2005 went, oh, well, we're quite happy to take lots of money from Sky and everything's going to be on pay-to-view TV. So cricket has gradually become less visible. And that has had a knock-on impact on participation and on engagement with the sport. So I think that shows the impact of very short-term thinking, just taking money from the highest bidder.
And ultimately, Cricket Australia want the WBBL to be like the world's premier competition, the equivalent of the IPL.
Yeah.
And it has to be said as well, this is worth pointing out, the IPL benefited for the first few years. That was on free-to-air television in this country because it got bought by ITV. And they benefited from that, and that helped turn the IPL into the world's T20 competition that was kind of bigger than just its Indian origins. So if Cricket Australia have those ambitions, then they really need to be ensuring those games are available. Anyway, we'll see what happened. The biggest thing is there's a lot of we don't knows, but the we don't knows are disappointing because Sky are not prepared to say yes, we're definitely showing these, which concerns us.
It makes us a bit suspicious as well that if you're not prepared to say yes, we are showing these games, we tend to default to, well, that means you're not going to.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'd be shouting from the rooftops saying, yes, of course we are. We want to keep all of our customers happy.
Anyway, probably enough banging on about Sky.
Okay, well, we have had some more exciting news coming out of Australia this week to do with pay increases for the women. So an additional...
Oh, it wasn't pay increases for us, Raf. You said pay increases and I started to get excited there.
Sorry, Sid. Sorry to disappoint you. In terms of the Australian women's players, an additional 800,000 Australian dollars is going to be invested in WNCL retainers, and an additional 400,000 Australian dollars is going to be invested in the WBBL retainers. So that's a 22% pay rise for the WNCL and 14% pay rise for the WBBL. So that's some quite big money going to be hitting the pockets of some of the Australian players, which is fantastic news. Where have they got this money from, Sid?
Well, that is one thing that's very interesting about this. This is essentially money that they found down the back of the sofa. Obviously, the impression is that last year wasn't quite as bad as they thought it would be. So that left them with some surplus that they were able to reinvest back into salaries. And there's a positive there, obviously, in that they're reinvesting that money into salaries. A lot of that's gone into women's salaries. That the men have kind of foregone that money. The Australian Cricketers Association have agreed that because they feel that it's important to invest in the women's salaries, which is a good thing. So there's loads of positives there. But the one thing they still haven't done as a result of this, they still haven't really bitten the bullet about the fact that ultimately, if you're going to increase the women's salaries, at some point you're only going to be able to do that by reducing the men's salaries. You're never going to be in a situation where cricket has so much income that we can just gradually increase the women's salaries until they get to the level of the men. Because partly, if cricket had that much money kicking around, the men would be going, well, actually, we do want some of that. They were prepared to forego this, but if you add another several million, the men aren't going to go, yeah, let's just give it all to the women so that they're earning exactly what we're earning. That's not realistic. Some point, a board somewhere is going to have this difficult conversation where they're going to have to say that we're going to increase the salaries of the women, and the only way of doing that is to take money from the men. So that's the challenge. Will the ECB be the first board to take that challenge, Raf? Because they did mention several months ago that they were going to increase the salaries for the women's 100. What have we heard about that since? Because we were supposed to hear about that in the next couple of days, I recall.
Yeah, we've heard diddly squat about that.
Maybe that's back down the back of the sofa. just no, it's not there. It's not down the back of the sofa. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, so it is interesting to think about in terms of the Australian pay rises, where that leaves us by comparison. in England, because if we look at globally the amount of kind of pay that goes to female cricketers, Australia's on top, and England are kind of lagging behind in second place, as always. Actually, not as always, because England were the first country to introduce professional contracts for its female cricketers. That is often forgotten. We did it in 2014. Australia didn't do it until 2015. And at the time, at that moment in time, when they announced those professional contracts, Giles Clarke, who was at that point the head honcho at the ECB, said that he wanted the England women cricketers to become the best paid female athletes in England and some of the best paid in the world. And that was quite an ambitious thing to say at that point. But ever since Cricket Australia kind of caught up in 2015, they've then been going on, galloping ahead, and they kind of keep throwing down the gauntlet for the ECB.
Yeah,
don't
they've really
they?
set the pace, haven't they? And that remains here, really. That in terms of like Let's just think about the worst paid players, because in some ways that's the most important point, the worst paid players. So the worst paid of the professionals in this country, and bear in mind we've got a lot less professionals as well, the worst paid of the professionals are still in pound terms, in GBP, about £8,000 less than the worst paid players in Australia. That includes the 100 and the RHF stuff in this country, and the BBL and the WNCL in Australia, so across the board with what you get over the whole season. So we're still lagging behind in this country, but on the other hand, we're still, this country is still way ahead of where they are in New Zealand, for example. So, it's a challenge for the ECB to carry on meeting. Whether the ECB in this country, that ambition to be the best paid female team sports, in retrospect, just looks ridiculous because we were never going to be able to keep up with football. The salaries in football are not kind of mandated in the same way they are in cricket. They're kind of all private contracts between players and the clubs. But I've heard rumours that some female professional footballers in this country are earning like £250,000 a year, which is, some serious money. And that cricket is not, most male professional cricketers are not earning anything like that. So we're never going to be able to keep up with football. That's unrealistic. But we're going to have to try and keep up with Australia, I think. And, that's the challenge that the ECB have. And they're going to have to look down the back of the sofa and try and find that money to carry on increasing those salaries.
Yeah, it's not just about the £8,000 gap between what our worst paid players get and what Australia's worst paid players get, is it? It's the other point you made about the fact that Australia have got so many more professionals. That's where the real gap is, in many ways. So even if the ECB do decide or do kind of actually fulfill that promise that they made about raising the salaries in the 100, there's still this concern that mostly that money will go to players who are already reasonably well remunerated. It will go to the ones who are at the top end of those salary bands, and so therefore there does need to be a balance between kind of your individual salaries for players and the breadth of professionalism on offer. Australia have got so much breadth, haven't they? That's their real advantage, I think.
Yeah, and considering that they've got a tenth of the size of the population that we have, that they're really making it very difficult for the ECB to keep up. But that's the challenge.
Yes. Okay. And finally this week, we just wanted to quickly mention, you are probably watching this on YouTube, as is what our viewers usually do, and the only way that you've been able to access the CRICKETher Weekly so far. But the CRICKETher Weekly is now going to be available as an audio podcast as well. We have had some requests for that, and we have finally bitten the bullet. So it is now currently going to be available on iTunes and online as well. So we'll put the link below the video. I think the link is also on the CRICKETher website.
Yeah, there's links on the website. So iTunes is there at the moment. Google's being a bit tardy, but we're going to get it up on Google as well. Do let us know if there's any other platforms that you feel that we should be kind of posting this to, and we'll try and do them as well. We'll put the other links down below as well, so they'll be there. Wherever you listen to us, wherever you watch us, please like and subscribe. I know it sounds like a cliche, the whole like and subscribe thing, but there's a reason people do it. It does help push us up the rankings rankings a bit, and gets a bit more visibility to the podcast. So thanks for everyone that's liked and subscribed previously, and thank you for liking and subscribing in the future.
So I'm sure people are very excited that they'll now be able to listen to this without having to see our faces, Sid.
Well, who wouldn't want to not see my face?
That's horrible. I love seeing your face.
Oh, thank you.
Anyway, that's all for this week. See you in a week's time. Bye for now.
Bye.